Hey folks, here at OS Reviews. You're watching our retro throwback review of the HTC Trophy. This was a Windows phone that came out in 2011 by HTC, and it features a 3.8-inch TFT LCD display. It runs on Windows Phone, so it runs on the Windows mobile operating system. Otherwise, you have access to the typical 1 GHz processor. There's also 512 megabytes of RAM, in addition to Wi-Fi, GPS, and Bluetooth, all the essentials that you would need in a phone. So one of the reasons why we're taking kind of a look back at the HTC Trophy, which was kind of a mid-tier device that wasn't really the spotlight of HTC's product catalog, is because it's very affordable now. You can actually find it on Amazon or eBay for under 15 bucks, which is quite low cost. Obviously, there are a few downsides. For one, using Windows Phone is not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and having Android is arguably more versatile as a used phone because you can still install your own launcher and then customize it as you would want. With that being said, Windows Phone is very optimized to run well on lower-end hardware, and this is no exception. Everything is sleek, it's smooth, and for basic tasks like browsing the web, accessing your email, downloading a few games, as well as calling, calendar, email support, all those things do work quite well on this phone. So taking a look at the hardware of the device first, it's pretty well built. There's a lot of attention to detail from HTC, which is what we expect from them. There's chamfered edges on the edges of the display, and you'll notice that there isn't a front-facing camera, which means that unfortunately you can't place video calls using this phone. There is the front earpiece, which almost seems like it could be a boom sound speaker, but unfortunately it's not. So it's kind of where they started to evolve the design a little bit over the few years. And there's also capacitive keys for going back home, search, and back, which are also backlit. And on the edges of the phone, there's access to a volume rocker, which is pretty tactile and responsive. There's also access to a micro USB port for charging. It takes about 2 hours to completely charge. And on the back, you have access to a 5 megapixel autofocus enabled camera with LED flash and a loudspeaker. It gets pretty loud. With that being said, this is not my favorite camera from HTC. It produces pretty washed out and fuzzy images. So if you're picking this up as a backup camera or, just for taking snapshots, it's not going to be the best device for you. There's a Windows Phone logo, and on the other side, there is a 2-stage camera shutter key for autofocus and taking images. So it's a bit of a shame that they had this hardware implemented really well, but the actual sensor is a little bit of a letdown. So there's a soft touch rubber coating that makes the phone really nice and easy to grip, although the size in 2017 is definitely petite, despite the fact that it has a 3.8-inch screen larger than the older 3.5 inches of iPhones. It still feels pretty small next to, let's say, a 5-inch device such as the Fecom Passion 660, as you can see there. The top features access to a nicely placed lock key and a power switch, and a 3.5mm headphone jack. And if we peel off the back cover, you'll see again more attention to detail by way of the color scheme. They made the entire phone red, which matches kind of the Verizon branding on the CDMA variant. And behind here, there's actually access to a full-size SIM card slot, since the Trophy is a dual network CDMA and GSM phone. So if you're going abroad and you're leaving North America, it transfers you over to GSM automatically, and it's unlocked. So you can go to Europe or Asia and just use it as a unlocked GSM phone, which is pretty cool. Memory is capped at 16 gigabytes, which is sufficient for most folks as far as some basic apps as well as some media content on here. So if we take a closer look at the interface and the features next, very classic Windows Phone, nothing really too jarring, but I guess if we take a look at the camera first, which again is the weakest point, it would be kind of the sharpness of the images. So if we are in a pretty well-lit studio environment, and it takes images pretty quickly, as you can see there are a few things you can play around with in terms of settings, such as adding scenes and effects, changing the metering, stuff like that, turning the flash on or off, but you can tell that the images are still pretty fuzzy, and colors are nicely balanced, they're nice and accurate, but it's just the sharpness that seems to be lacking, and it seems a little fuzzy. So that's the one thing I was a little bit disappointed with. I expected a sharper image from HTC, especially with autofocus on board. Anyways, if we move on to the phone quality next, I was fairly impressed with the call quality of this device. The microphone is loud and clean sounding, and the speakerphone is also crisp and loud despite being placed on the back. So even for outdoor calls, it sounds very good. So again, as a 2017 device, if you pick it up now, you will still be pleased with the calling experience. Speaking of, we can discuss the battery life next. Since it is a fairly low-powered processor and a smaller display, you'll notice that it will last you for about 2 days before you need to recharge it again, which is pretty nice to see. So long battery life because you're not doing as much intensive tasks or benchmarking on here. Top features access to the Wi-Fi status, battery status, and these tiles in terms of their colors can also be changed and rearranged by dragging and holding. And sliding over gives you a list view of all your applications. There's not that much bloatware on here by Verizon, but there are a few HTC specific apps, such as access to the HTC Hub. It's a social networking hub that accommodates everything from Twitter to Facebook and pops it into one place. There are also a few extras such as Netflix for watching mobile Netflix videos on the go, Slacker Radio if you want a subscription service. There is also sound enhancement for playing back music. It works, again, pretty well as a media player and an MP3 player. A few editing tools for your software, for your images, maps, standard Internet Explorer mobile, and there's also access to kind of Word that you can use to quickly create and edit PowerPoint, Excel, and Word documents on the go, which has always been one of the highlights of Windows phones. Is really that productivity element that goes after business users that want to really work while on the go and have access to their Microsoft information. So creating a new PowerPoint is very easy and snappy. So here we have a sample PowerPoint. Alternatively, the mobile Word also works fairly well. You can see it brings up a full keyboard that's pretty sensitive and easy to type on because HTC did have a very good display as far as sensitivity is concerned, and there's predictive text that you can turn on or off as well. Accelerometer works pretty well, but it doesn't take up the full breadth of the display, but it still is fairly easy to press and to tap on. They kind of centered it in a way where it's aligned really nicely with your fingers. Despite not having the largest display in the world, it still makes a pretty comfortable and accurate typing experience. I can search up specific words, I can change the font size, I can highlight it and rechange some of the formatting stuff, but for more intensive editing, I would still recommend using a full tablet or a computer because, again, you are kind of limited by the screen size here. If we take a quick look at the web browsing experience of the HTC Trophy, again, you would expect a single-core 1 GHz Snapdragon processor to be not very good in 2017, but for most sites, it does still fully load. It just takes a little bit longer to completely render pages. So here we see the mobile page loading fairly quickly with your elements like videos and images. If you toggle into the desktop view of the browser, it does take significantly longer to completely render, but once it is rendered, it does work pretty well. Pinch to zoom and other reflowing of text is handled pretty well using Internet Explorer. It's smooth, it's overall pretty silky, even though it does take a few seconds longer to load, and it's not a bad web browsing experience at all. Flash isn't supported out of the box, but if you want to view back YouTube videos, you do have to install your own client or go to the mobile site of YouTube to view those videos back, and it works pretty well if you're using 480p resolution. Switching the resolution to 1080p or 720p doesn't make as much sense since the display here is technically, not HD resolution, and also will take quite a bit longer to completely render. But otherwise, a pretty decent video watching and web browsing experience. Screen itself is LCD, but still offers pretty good viewing angles. You can see even if you put it off at an extreme angle, colors are not too bad. It's just not as bright or vibrant as AMOLED panels or OLED panels, but that's to be expected. And again, this was always more of a mid-tier smartphone than a super high-end device. Other features, very typical, again, like the aforementioned Slacker Radio. You have access to basic utility apps like a calculator. There's access to basic memo pads that you can start, as well as we can go into the settings and take a look at your themes and colors that you can change on this. Typography is elegant. It's nicely thought out. The images and everything is easy. It's fluid. Everything has been optimized to run quite well on even an aging processor, and there's no real slowdown or sluggishness that I detected just by handling this in regular day-to-day use. So that's been a look back or a throwback review of the HTC Trophy. In 2017, it's still a decent value if you're looking for a very, very low-cost phone, maybe for the purposes of backup or even as a travel device, since, again, if you go abroad, you can use that SIM card functionality, which is pretty cool. It does lack a lot of features, such as a front-facing camera. I'm not a huge fan of the rear-facing camera either, and I think that it could be a little bit snappier sometimes, but for general tasks, it still performs pretty well, as long as you keep your expectations modest. And HTC, as always, presents a beautiful hardware as far as their design, their themes, and their color choices, which again align both inside as well as outside. So thanks for watching this video here at OS Reviews. This has been the HTC Trophy and a quick look back.